Another terrible hat, but fear not. The chess is much better. Two legends of the game sat down at the board, and with white, Veselin Topalov. He'd retired from chess, started a very successful side career in goldfish impersonation, but he's back from the dead in chess terms and playing in the Leon Masters against the one and only Vishy Anand. A guy so good they once called him Stockfishy Anand. Now this was played over the board, rapid play, and Arjun Erigaisi even got an invite to this tournament. Woohoo! No longer playing the open ones only. This is a closed invite event, but now we're jumping in on these two legends because Toppy starts with pawn to e4 here, and we go down a mainline Roy Lope or a Spanish game. Is he going to take the knight, win the pawn? Vishy says do your worst after pawn to a6. Clock times on the left, 20 minutes each. This is exciting stuff. Now if you go for this, well, there's a sneaky trap. Queen d4, double attack, win back your pawn. So instead, we see bishop a4 played, although the exchange variation is a playable one. Vishy now goes knight f6, pressuring the center, and we get castles. Do you want to take? That's the open Spanish variation. Black wins back the pawn, or white rather. But instead we see bishop e7, the classic way to go. Rook e1 now covers the e-pawn, so there's a genuine threat to take the knight on c6, win a pawn. Therefore b5 breaks the pin. The bishop stumbling backwards, castles, and now everyone and his dog plays c3 down the years. Look to expand in the center. But then you can run into the Marshall gambit here. Give a pawn, great play for black. So instead, a4 is played, one of these so-called anti-Marshall moves. h3, another one, takes a tin opener to the queen side. Vishy calmly brings the cannon onto the b file and pawn d3. Vishy goes d6, little bit of pawn structure symmetry. The players do a fist bump, explode it out. They've still got a sense of humour in their 50s, and after h3, giving the king some Lufthansa, now Vishy breaks a rule, putting the knight on the rim. That's dim. Gimme, gimme, gimme a bishop after midnight, he says. Toppy's like, nah, I want to keep my bishop pair. Can't Vishy just win a pawn? Well, yes, but you mangle your structure. Knight c3 can come, win the pawn straight back. So instead, we see c5 from Vishy. Lovely space gain, nice undulating formation, very fluid. Toppy says I'm going to take there, open the a file. Pawn recaptures here, and now he goes c3. Tidy move, looking for expansion. The knight comes back to c6. Vishy's like, I see you, Toppy. I'm keeping an eye on d4 now, and now what's going on here? Veselin Topalov, former FIDE world champion, putting a knight on the edge of the board. Has he gone nuts? By the way, if you're wondering about FIDE world champions and classical world champions, well, it's when Kasparov split from the main stuff of chess, set up his own thing, professional chess association or something. We had this rift in chess. It was like boxing, but they unified, hooray, somewhere around the early mid-2000s. Now we see pawn h6, completing the bunny ears pawn formation, and knight c2. Aha, the knight's on a Bilbo Baggins journey here. Rook e8, very tidy, and knight e3, headed for the promised land. Toppy's got a tighter grip on that square than Chucky's grip on his pen, and now after bishop f8, opening the eyes of the rook, we see bishop d2, completing development, but that is one ugly bishop. It's crying, stuck behind pawns and pieces. Bishop e6 played, challenging the sniper. That one's doing damage from a distance. So what do we see? Bishop takes on e6. Of course, Veselin makes a whooshing sound as he goes. So many top pros do when they move that kind of distance across the board. The cannon recaptures here, and the domination of the square could be completed with knight d5 because there's no captures or pawn takes, and you fork these two pieces. It's a nice way to get the knights off. Open the bishops, but missed. Instead, we see queen b3 activating, yes, but somehow looks a bit weird. lined up opposite this rook. Vishy goes queen c8. There's a mysterious move. What's he got planned? We get rook a2, Toppy preparing to stack the two towers, and after rook e8, rook ea1, now we see queen to e6. The big reveal, going for a queen exchange. Boo! Half the audience falling asleep, but fear not, knight d5 comes and things are spicing up. Not quite a jalfrezi, but we're on our way. Now is knight c7 a threat here, going to fork town? I was about to say fret, hard to get the words out. Well, no, because now the queen is unprotected and under fire. So here, king h8 justified, coming away from some checks because this isn't a threat, but knight e7 is. Huge pressure on this one. So that's why we see the move of pawn to c4. Explosive, but also giving Vishy play here, opening his rook. Very double-edged. The position's roughly level, but the player's now walking a tightrope. That pawn now defended by the rook on a2. Vishy brings this rook to the c file here, and Toppy decides it's time to capture on f6. Don't know why he thought now was the moment, but this is how the game went. Queen recaptures, bishop c3, that one biting on granite, especially when this knight hops into that outpost in the centre. What a beast that is. And now, instead of seeing any captures here, which was playable, bishop takes on d4, one of the top moves, we see knight d2. Is this manoeuvring justified? Who knows, because after knight e2 check, king f1 to stay with the pawn, knight f4, very dangerous. It's actually black who's getting more of an initiative here, because how can this knight hit c4 or f1? Mum and dad standing in the way, and if you can't get to one of those squares, you can't get to e3, you can't get to d5. This one's stumbling. Rook a7 played, looking for play, king g8 covers the pawn here, and now the top move of Stock Squid is like g3, given a pawn, or h4, then g3, but okay, missed. We see this rook activating, pressuring down here. Now we get rook e8, preparing to do some defensive manoeuvring, and after rook d7, rook e6 still playable, good move, but rook a8 played, challenging the file, called a miss, but these ones leave the board, and queen g6. It's Vishy Anand turning the screw on Toppy's king side. He's forced to go pawn g3, and the h pawn drops off the board. The squares around the king now Swiss cheese, light squared complex. Knight f3 played, looking to do defensive manoeuvring. This queen comes to h5 now, hits the knight, king g2 very natural, and rook e6. Star move, headed for f6, where it then pressures the knight. The king's getting ripped open, especially after this, because knight h4 is played, and you can go g5, that kind of thing. There's a threat for white to take that knight on h3, but this is more swashbuckling. Knight to f4 check. Not the favourite of the engine, but forget the boring engine. This is human chess. We see captures, hard to live with that one, and now does Vishy take off the knight? No, he does not. His killer instinct still intact. He plays pawn takes on f4 here. Best move for white is to now bring the queen into some defence, allow the knight to drop. But instead, the knight is saved, very natural. I mean, white's attack looks super dangerous as well, of course, and now Vishy shows why he didn't take the knight off, because he brings the queen into the danger zone. Queen g4 check or queen e2 preferred, but it's all about the danger of this pawn, the rook swinging, and that's why we now get this desperado stuff from Topalov. Queen d5 still apparently best, but he plays the sacrifice of the rook on f7, just trying to rip that king's home open, lure it out of the box, because yes, he's given a whole rook, but he does have an extra knight, remember. Now a pawn as well. Exposed king, pin. Now we get queen d5. Not entirely clear what the point of that move is. Maybe to check from b7 or f5 one day. The tactics here weren't quite working on g7. This queen can always come back and check. Double attack here. Now it's queen g4 check, which comes on the board anyway. King f1 played, and f3 shutting the trap, looking for a kind of lollies mate. Not quite mate, the king can run, but then the f pawns drop in. Super dangerous. So knight e3 played, played, covering that square. Queen g5 offers an exchange of the ladies, and this is one of the challenges here. Because Vishy is now an exchange up, you can't get them off the board. You've got to keep attacking. So pawn e5 played, captures, breaking the structure, very nice. This one drops with check. King scurrying home. Now the queen re-centralizes, rook hit, but we don't see a repetition. Vishy comes with the queen. Now knight c4, the king gets out of dodge, no more pins. The central pawn drops, yes, hitting the queen, but it activates once more. The queen on d5, undefended. This is a deadly pin, and that's why we now see, reluctantly, queen to e4. These ones leaving the board. Not ideal when you're an exchange down, but there were too many problems here. Bishop d6, Vishy reactivating. Knight c4, pressuring the bishop. No time to take on e4. That's why bishop f4. f3 covers the pawn, and pawn h5. The red carpet rolled out. Run, Forest. Now we see bishop e1 covering that square. So bang, g5. Renew the threat. Those ones running. Brother and sister, hand in hand. Let's go. Bishop f2 hits the c pawn, and after rook a6, ignoring it, letting it drop, we see why. Because Vishy activates, he does a kaboom as he drops the rook on a1. The king scurries up, rook c1, look at those pieces, absolutely kebabbed. b3 forced, check, king g1 and h4. Let's go, baby. Bishop d6 therefore, trying to get off that monster of a bishop. We see h3, this one captures, pawn takes back, and now this is classy. After knight d6, we don't see the pawn pushing, we see Vishy switching up the plan here, going after these weak ones on the third rank. The king gleefully steps forward, pressuring the h-pawn. Now rook takes here, defending it, b4 on the board, king g6, of course you got to activate the monarch in the endgame. e5 played, and Vishy does some real nice waiting game chess. He goes rook e3 here, b5 played, and now does he take this pawn here? Still playable, still good, but you let white take here? No, he goes rook b3, just classy kind of waiting move. Get white into a zugzwang. Now we see e6 and the king steps in. This is the point. We get a check. Don't take the pawn on e6. Then you're getting skewered here, or forked rather. Absolute fork town. Population Vishy. Don't do that one. So king e7 played instead. b6, it drops off the board. Topalov struggling for moves, and after king takes on h3, king takes on e6, we see resignation here from Veselin Topalov. Why? Well, this knight just cannot cope with rook and pawn. Say it one day gives itself up, well obviously then you can win the game with the king and rook checkmate. I think Vishy knows it. Great game here from these two legends. Smash subscribe if you haven't already, and for another epic game of chess, check out the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching, and see you soon.